It's finally time to get an operating system on this IBM RS 6000 43P Model 150. And quite a bit later on in the video, I'm going to perform a surprise upgrade on this system that I'm very excited about, in case you can't tell. The installation of the operating system on this was both boring and spicy. There are several places on the internet where you can find the installation CDs. I decided to install AIX 4.3.3. It seemed kind of like the sweet spot of, it's a fairly old version, but it is a new enough version that it supports all of the future hardware that I may want to put into this machine. And it hasn't removed support for any of the hardware that I may eventually want to put into this machine. I get a lot of this kind of software from, what is it, WinWorld, I want to say. I'll put text on if that's totally wrong. And also from fsck.technology. And neither of those sources were great for this project. fsck.technology has the base installation CDs, it has the bonus pack CDs, but it doesn't have the documentation CDs. WinWorld has all of everything, but when I tried to do the base installation CDs, they wouldn't boot. So I ended up doing kind of a hodgepodge of the two. I pulled the base installation CDs from fsck.technology and everything else from WinWorld. It's very important. The first time when I did this install, I think I have, at this point, I have installed 3 times just to kind of work out a bunch of the kinks in the process. And I just used the CDs from fsck.technology. Now, the problem with that was it doesn't have any of the documentation disks, and not having manual pages on a Unix machine is rough. It makes the whole experience rough. Like, how do I use this command? Man foo, and it like, oh, no man pages installed. Oh. So kind of mixing and matching like that worked out fine. Now the base install was pretty boring. I powered on the machine, I interrupted the initial boot process, I kind of dug through a couple of menus and said, aha, install the operating system from the CD-ROM, and then it just booted from the CD. And once I got into the installer off the CD-ROM, it looked almost identical to the installer that I used for AIX 4.1.5 on the Apple network servers. Almost identical. So the experience with that helped me here, and I kind of knew that it would. That was part of the plan. There was a method to the madness. But once you start installing from that initial installer, there are no choices to make other than what language do you want, and do you want to do an update install / repair install, or do you want to do a completely from scratch install? And that's it. And then it just kind of chugs away for a really, really long time. It was quite a bit faster on this machine than it was on the Apple network server, because the optical drive on this is considerably faster than the optical drive on the Apple network server, and the hard drive is considerably faster. So the process did go quite a bit more smoothly in that respect. And then you sort of boot up into X Windows, into a graphical environment. We'll call it a graphical environment, where you can set up some things about the system. And at this point, I highly recommend sort of doing the minimal things, but install the documentation. So for sure, you need to have created the documentation CD, and because in order to install the documentation, it also wants to install a web browser and a bunch of other stuff, you need some of the bonus pack CDs. So technically, the operating system install for this machine is 10 disks. Now, I didn't burn all 10. I burnt the base for one of the documentation CDs. There's also an extended documentation CD, and I think I only burned the first disc of the bonus pack. There are 4 in the bonus pack. So I have no idea what other stuff is on the remainder of that. I'm sure I'm going to end up digging into that soon. Dig through, install the various documentation packages, pick everything, just install everything, because you don't know what packages you're eventually going to install. And this is a thing I found kind of odd about this. On modern Linux installations, when you install a package, the documentation is part of that package, so you kind of install them together, whereas on AIX, it's you have the software and you have the documentation, and you pick them independently. So you can pick to install documentation for software you didn't install, and you know, sort of every possible 4-way combination of that. And that seems weird to me. During this process, there is a lot of swapping the disks around and put this disk in, put that disk in. Now, a thing that I highly recommend is when it asks you to change disks, put the disk in, close the tray. It's going to spin the disk and kind of think for a second, and then say, you know, hit enter or whatever it's asking you to click to acknowledge that you've changed the disk. If you do that step too soon, it will come back and say, this isn't a disk of the correct format, OMG, and we'll just kind of have a freak out, and then we'll ask you again to put the disk in, and then you just hit enter, and it says, okay, no, everything's fine, it's cool. Can't it tell that it's still in the process of examining the disk instead of having that initial freak out? Anyway, it's the little things. Once sort of the base system configuration is done, which just, is walking through the menus and, setting the time and setting the root password and stuff like that, very boring stuff, and installing all of the documentation. Then you come out to do a graphical login, and then the adventure really begins. Here we are, the first real login. Now, even though the system has come up, it looks fine. We're not done. Something interesting I noticed about this is the default background here. They did not expect the existence of a 1600 by 1200 display, so that the gradient repeats, and I don't think it was intended to. The other displays with the repeating patterns look fine. It just I find it kind of humorous. Like, who would ever have a display that big? That's just silly talk. Now, a couple things to notice about the system at this point in the installation. One, I almost, out of habit, I almost typed df-h. This version of df way predates the human readable form. So this is listing the sizes of the disk partitions in 512 byte blocks. So divide this by half for the number of kilobytes, and you'll notice the partitions are real small. I read a bunch of online advice, at least one installation guide that I will link in the description, that recommends now go in and adjust the sizes. I recommend not doing it now. The very first time when I did this install, this is, I think, attempt number 3 to kind of figure out how to do it properly. I did that, and I ended up in a situation where, so this is a 9.1 gigabyte disk. I made all the partitions bigger, and then I got stuck at a point where I wanted one of the partitions bigger, but it couldn't get bigger because all the space on the drive was now occupied. And there are commands, which I'll show a little bit later, to within a logical volume, to increase the size of a disk But once you increase it, at least on this version of AIX, you cannot make the partitions smaller. So if you make, say, temp really large, and you later decide, oh crap, I don't need that much temp space, I need to make home bigger, well, that's a tough break. you have to put another disk in the system. I have not gotten far enough into my journey with AIX to figure out how to add a new volume and how to move. Future video. Future video. So what I am going to do now is, there's still a lot of software to be installed. So I'm going to run smit, and I'm going to move this over a little bit so it's easier for me to see. Software installation. I know I'm going to need some of these disks. I think I'm going to... There will be more disk swapping. Install software, and I have been doing it by package name because I want specific things. From the CD. Well, I could feel the whole table vibrating when that CD spins up with it. Now, the thing that's most important to me that I really want to run on this system is I want to run graphics stuff. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to pick GL, Figs, X11. And I think that's it for now. And I'm going to go through and I'm going to try to install all the stuff for these. I'm just going to, so I don't have any of those devices. Runtime environment, development tools. I'm going to go ahead and install, not that, Figs, even though I don't particularly intend to use Figs on this machine. I may change my mind later. And I'm just going to pick all the things, because you can see in some of these packages, actually this one I'm not going to do, because so the @ sign means this package is already installed, and the plus sign means you've met the license requirements, but the package is not installed. So there's some of these I'm not going to do. Like that was already fully installed. I'm not going to install the X11 compat stuff. And I think that's it. Okay. Say okay, okay. Okay, how many times do I have to say okay? So now this is gonna run for a bit. Hold please. So it is going to pick up some additional packages due to other prerequisites. I put disk 1 in. I'm pretty sure at some point it's going to ask at least for disk 2. Because that's the thing. Like during that whole installation process, it only initially used the first disk. I guess there was other disks to install the documentation and some of the other packages. All right, so I did have to shuffle it around. That really threw me that the initial install like just pulls from the first disk and that's it. That really weirded me out. Okay, so now it wants volume 2. Wait for a second, wait for it to spin up, or it will say, there's no volume there. Oh. And off it goes. All right, and it's done. Let's see how long it says it took. Well, it doesn't say. All right, well, yeah. So that's seven minutes to do that total install. Done. Cancel. Quit out of smit. All right, so we can do, what is it? LSVG, and we'll show what volume groups we have. the disk is still grinding away, because what it's doing is the SMIT, well, I don't even think that it's SMIT specifically. I think it's install P, which is the actual package installer. Think of it if you've used Fedora Linux, like install P is RPM, is the real thing that does the low level work. One of the features that it has is while it's installing things, it can automatically increase the size of the volume groups. So you'll notice that the user partition grew, right? Because the package installer automatically grew it to the size that it needed. So that's why I recommend, like, don't mess with the size of the root partition or the user partition, or probably var or temp, because as far as I can tell, the things that need to mostly put stuff on those can figure out how to increase the size of them as necessary. And there ends up being a lot of disk grinding. So we can do lsvg, what is it, -p root vg, and it will tell us information about how much of the disk there is and how much of it is available. So most of this disk, 4/5 of this disk, is still available, is not claimed by anything. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to increase the size of the home partition, because I feel like that's what, 16 megabytes is kind of maybe ridiculous. So you do that with a command called change file system. Now, I'm going to give it this size equals, let's say ... there for right now, and then the name of the file system. Again, the size value that I'm going to tell it here is the number of 512K blocks. I don't, like, my brain doesn't work on that. So we can do some math in the shell. So say I want it to be, I know that this is a 9 gigabyte disk, so I want to make it a gigabyte. So I want to make it 1024 megabytes, which is 1024 kilobytes, and there's 2 blocks in a kilobyte. So I need to set the size to be that. And I can actually, let's see, I can actually do that math right in line here. And it will evaluate that, and it's gonna grind away and do stuff for a while, because it's basically formatting the disk, I guess, and it takes a while. And so now we can do df again and see, oh, look at that. It's bigger, and basically the whole disk is free. Okay, so now I'm going to log out. And log back in, which I will create a user soon enough. So now I should just be able to say, every platform has decided to call this program something different. On Linux, it's glxinfo. On SGIs, I believe it's glinfo. On IBM's, it's xglinfo, just for lols. And we learn a couple really irritating things right now. One, I'm going to scroll this back up. We learned that the only visual that is supported on this GXT 135p card is 8-bit color. Like, it doesn't even support a true color visual. I have no I know that hardware can do true color. They just decided to not enable it in software, which is really, feels very rude. And there's no OpenGL support at all. I knew there was no hardware OpenGL support, But at least at one time, IBM had a really, really good software OpenGL implementation that was very fast and did a lot of very clever stuff to sort of dynamically generate code to do the rendering on the CPU. Oh, there's this stupid problem with this monitor. They didn't even enable that. So there's no OpenGL on this at all, which is the whole thing that I wanted this system for. This is why I wanted this toy to play with. Fortunately, I have a way to solve this. I had briefly shown this card in an unboxing video back in January. This is an IBM GXT 2000P. It is a entry-level 3D card, OpenGL card for RS 6000 workstations. Now, it's my understanding that this card is the same graphics chip as this card, the Diamond S3 FireGL 2. I've read a bunch of things that claim that these are the same card. I haven't looked to see what the PCI IDs are, so I don't know if they're even similar or anything like that. The cards look completely different. I mean, they're using what look to be the same kind of RAM chips, although it appears that the GXT card has roughly twice as many memory chips. I know for sure that this is an IBM chipset, but beyond that, I don't actually know. And I'm looking at this card, and something that I've never really noticed before, because I haven't ever taken the heatsink off, is that there are two. These can't be the same card. I'm going to rudely interrupt myself, because what I'm saying and what I'm about to say is so close to correct, but is actually kind of totally wrong. The GXT 2000P is not a FireGL 2. Nobody ever said that it was. I just misremembered. The GXT 2000P is a FireGL 1. Now, the FireGL 2, 3, 4 are all some sort of variations of the GXT 6000P and the GXT 6500P, because all 5 of those cards have the later, I want to say RT1000 rasterizer and GT1000 geometry unit. The GXT 4000P and 4500P just have the rasterizer. They don't have the geometry processing unit. Now, I don't have any of those later GXT cards, and I don't have a FireGL 1. So the mixed fruit to fruit comparison that I'm about to talk about, I can't actually do, but I would like to do someday. So I'm going to continue to work on acquiring a bunch more of these cards. Okay, back to what I was saying. Those online sources are full of lies, because this clearly has 2 large BGA packages on it, and this card only has 1. All right, so I've probably debunked that myth. It may be possible to do some kind of fruit to other fruit comparison of these 2 cards. This card will only work in AIX. This card will only work in Windows. When I was in the Linux Technology Center at IBM, I tried really, really hard to get IBM to let me either do open source drivers for these chipsets, or release documentation to the community, or something, but they weren't having it. So there are no Linux drivers for either of these cards. So they'll never be able to run on the same operating systems. They'll never be able to run the same cards on the same CPUs. So it would, be apples to bananas. Like that, even farther than apples and oranges. I don't know, maybe those aren't actually fruit to fruit of some sort comparison. If you'd be interested in seeing that kind of a comparison, like I'm not even sure what kind of applications I would compare them using, let me know in the comments, and I'll maybe see if I can come up with something. In the meantime, I am going to upgrade the 43P with this card. And performing that upgrade is a little bit of an adventure. You have to do it in a very, very specific way, or you'll be sad. A thing I learned the hard way is there's no like default base driver for X Windows. So like on Linux, if I were running Linux on this and I put a card in that didn't have a driver, there's a dumb driver called the OFFB driver, the Open Firmware Frame Buffer driver, that just uses Open Firmware commands to, it's kind of the Open Firmware equivalent of like the VESA BIOS extensions. It can use that to just like set up a dumb display, map the memory, and write some pixels to the screen. And so I could put I could put this card in a Linux machine, and it would come up in OFFB driver, and it would work. It'd be slow. It'd be painfully slow, but it'd work. And then if it was a card that actually had drivers, I could install drivers. AIX is apparently not quite so luxurious. I made the mistake once of putting, I don't even think it was that card. It was another card. I was doing some other experiments that I didn't have drivers for, and I put it in, and it starts to boot up, and it loads up, and you just, after it goes through the initial operating system loading screen, and the screen goes black to start loading AIX, like, that was it. Just black screen. Have fun, kid. Okay. So, what you have to do, and very conveniently, the weird noise thing, that's the thing that's so frustrating about the problem with this monitor, is that it's intermittent. Sometimes the monitor is fine, and sometimes it just has this stripe of noise. The thing that you have to do is you have to come in here, going back into software installation, you have to install the drivers before you put the hardware in. Again, what is it? Install by package name. I know it's going to have me shuffle disks around. I don't even remember what disk is currently in there. But at least from here, I can select which packages I need. And I'm going to go back to OpenGL and Figs. And I think maybe X11.2 and devices is the very important one. Say OK. And I'm going to just put in 2000. And just everything that has 2000 in the name, I'm going to select. Actually, I'm going to select this whole bundle. Okay, and it wrapped around. All right, that should be sufficient. Should be able to say okay, okay. He's still okay. I really, really, really mean it. And when this is done, I can power off the machine, put the new card in, power the machine back on, and I should come up into graphics, and everything should work fine. A lot of should there. A lot of should. After a cleansing reboot and taking a moment to create a user so that I'm not just doing everything as root, we can finally see moment of truth. And yes, we have OpenGL. And it shows the vendor as IBM and the renderer as GXT2000. One thing I noticed in this is there is at least one OpenGL extension that I have never had a piece of hardware and a driver that support that extension. The rest of these extensions, Vertex, multi-draw arrays, what's the other IBM one? Oh, texture mirrored repeat. This ended up becoming, getting promoted and becoming an ARB extension, and then becoming part of core OpenGL. Multi-mode, same with IBM RasterPause Clip. Multi-mode draw arrays, I don't think ever got promoted to core, but I think at one point I implemented support for it in Mesa, so there was some hardware exposed to that. But this is a new one. I thought at this point in my life, I knew about and had, at least taken a look at and possibly even written software to use every OpenGL extension that ever existed. But that one is okay. I might have to do something with that. But all of this would be very boring. We have to actually have, like, this doesn't prove anything. There's no proof of OpenGL until we have gears running. And it runs at, so it's clearly VSync locked because it's running at 75 FPS, which is, I am guessing, the refresh rate that it is programming the monitor for. So that's interesting information. And it runs. Now, I'm not going to show how I set up the little bit of a development environment that's currently on here because it's pretty rubbish. I'm going to try to get that sorted out. That is going to be the topic of the next video, where I am going to also get the other 43P fully working up to this state. And I hope to be able to run something a little bit larger than just GL gears. If you are interested in seeing that video, I highly recommend that you click the subscribe button. If you have enjoyed this content, I would really, really appreciate it if you would click the like button. And until next time, try to remember the good stuff.